Hi, I'm absolutely thrilled to be back here with Dr. Martin Patrick, playwright, author, and educationalist. I mean, that's what you spent a huge amount of your career.
Yeah.
And for a long period within that, one of the things that you were teaching was film studies.
Film studies is very interesting because I think a film cannot be good without an intellectually discursive and emotionally aware director.
Well, so this is interesting in itself, because I was kind of thinking that film studies straight away almost seems to set up the film buffs and people who are in and around film with the audience who may or may not feel as though we know much about film. And is there I kind of wonder if there is there do we need to, as a viewer, do we need to have a deep knowledge of film to really appreciate film, or can we just appreciate film, or should we try and look behind the scenes as well as with the film? Because I guess that I'm a viewer, and to tell me a little bit about the different dimensions, because I know you love film as well as teaching.
I do. Well, I think the thing to remember is that with film studies, you're not a film buff. There are some people that can tell you, Joe Blow swept the soundstage when The Matrix is being made, and it's just, I could care less about that. I'm not interested in that. What I am interested in is the process that goes into making film.
Yeah.
Film studies is about studying the language of film. So that's the editing, the cinematography, that is the way in which the script works and has been revised. That is the performance which is being brought. There is a wonderful French word, and it is called mise en scène. Mise en scène is about everything that appears in the frame.
Right, and so I guess that the thing with film is that there are so many different dimensions, and I think that's interesting, isn't it? When we go to the cinema and so on, and we look, if we happen to be staying there till the end, this huge list of credits, and I remember that somebody kind of talking about just the army of people that it takes, and to be working kind of collaboratively to end up with a film, it must be quite extraordinary, isn't it? From starting with hopefully a good script to then,
If you do not have a good script, you're starting from nowhere. The script is vital. I think the scripting, the casting, and the direction are the core elements that goes into a good film. When somebody is studying film, you're going to be studying those, I think, core elements of what the film is about. Its contents, its subject, its the subplot, the cultural impact of the text.
Yeah, and on that, when it comes to films, I guess one of the key starting points is the story, and hopefully from the story there'll be a really, really good script. And it's great also that because you've got your experience as a dramatist too. I guess many of us may well be frustrated that we feel sometimes that we don't necessarily, I guess perhaps in mainstream cinema, get a rich blend of films based on really rich kind of stories. Don't get me wrong, there will always be those that will creep in, but perhaps that we don't get as many as we might like. Do you have a take on that?
I think that it depends on what country you're looking at.
Right. Yeah.
Because in Chinese cinema, in Japanese cinema, in Iranian cinema, in cinemas outside of the United States and Britain, you can find far more philosophical text, and by that I mean something where the question of existence comes in to the story.
Lovely. Yeah, this is lovely that you point that out, isn't it? Because the times where if I happen to be watching some films from Europe or from Asia and so on, you do get that, and you sense that from the pace, sometimes the setup, or it may well be just something that's a very intimate, just a short period of time. And occasionally, very occasionally, you might happen to get that with an American or perhaps a British film, but it tends to be far more rare. And those films do have a subtle effect of inviting us to explore what it is to be human.
I think there's more needs to be said on that, because I do actually really enjoy classical Hollywood cinema. Whether it's Casablanca, whether it's something like a Betty Davis in almost anything. I mean, I think she was one of the greatest actresses that ever appeared on screen.
So now that we're talking about the films that many of us will know here, we're watching in Britain or in the US, let's talk about then, I guess, great Hollywood, let's say, movie. So just for the purpose of that, I grabbed, and I'm not much an expert on film. I just happened to grab a few different films that I guess that I'd seen over the years, and different ones that kind of really caught my eye. And one of the first films that the first one that I think that it's one of the first films that I had a reaction to was this film, The Elephant Man, by David Lynch. I don't know much, but it is, and it's funny you're talking about the human condition, because when I watched this film, and first of all I was a bit nervous about watching this film. I remember at school somebody had a book about the about John Merrick, and I found it at the time when I was very young, a bit quite affecting. But the film was beautifully affecting, and I thought, well, this film is actually what it's brilliantly about. Isn't somebody who, it's about the human condition.
I think what makes this film extraordinary is that you're dealing with somebody who is beyond, larger than life, literally larger than life, and because his emotions are also larger than life, and we as people who are getting on with our daily lives can deal with the angst of daily life, but what we can't deal with is something that's beyond our realm, because it requires too much. And I think one of the things that makes this such a compelling film is that you've got somebody who is, to all intents and purposes, somebody who is extraordinary, and into the realms of fantastic, into the realms of
frightening.
Well, that's on the one hand, some people may classify him as grotesque. But there are things that people do in their daily life which are grotesque, from the comments that they say. But I think what makes John Merrick, the character in this, such an interesting person, is that whilst physically he is beyond realism, he was a real person,
and that exquisite, with such emotion. And I think that's what, again, the film does.
No,
really.
I think what makes it extraordinary is how the character that's played by Anthony Hopkins, how he, John Merrick, the freak, helps this man to find his humanity. It is not that John Merrick lacks the humanity.
No, right.
He is the most humane person in it.
That's right, and that's what's
he
powerful
helps
about
everybody else to find their humanity.
Hugely. And it was interesting, the things you were talking about before. I think that the direction, the script, the cast, extraordinary cast. Anthony Hopkins, Sir John Gielgud,
and the great Anne Bancroft,
and of course John Hurt in the lead role. So an extraordinary kind of film. Tell us, are there any particular films you talked about, Casablanca? Tell us one or two films that you really, really love, and perhaps that, particularly if there's anything that particularly crosses as the line that you think in terms of from the purpose of film studies that you taught, but also just as a film that is incredibly watchable, something that you think just holds up and it just ticks every single box.
I think Casablanca is one of the greatest Hollywood films ever made, and I think Now Voyager, which is my very favourite film with Bette Davis in it, because curiously enough, you're looking at somebody who everyone else sort of classifies as unlovable, that she is someone with emotional, psychological problems, and she has to change. But as she changes the people around her. I think the film is classic because, to some extent, a lot of people expect Bette Davis to be a sort of bitchy and witty sort of person, as in All About Eve. But what I love about Now Voyager is that as she blossoms, as she becomes beautiful, she brings out other people's beauty and their humanity. So I love that about the film. And I think what I also love about the film is that it's classic Warner Brothers. It's a classic American film that has a beginning, middle, end, that has a great score by Max Steiner, that emotionally just turns you inside out because you are asked to identify with her. And that's an extraordinary relationship that one undertakes in film studies, to understand what it means to emotionally identify with somebody who is so unlike yourself.
And that's an interesting thing.
I am a black man,
yeah, right.
and there is this middle-aged white woman who I feel as though my heart is breaking for her.
And that's something that it's interesting, isn't it, that film can extraordinarily do, isn't it? And very often, you know, sometimes within a few minutes we find ourselves really drawn in, affected, and having that relationship or to somebody on the celluloid. Can you tell me, are there any films in recent years that have particularly caught your eye, or you think of note that you want to particularly?
There is a remake of a Douglas Sirk, a classic. Douglas Sirk was one of the great filmmakers who went to Hollywood in the 1950s and made extraordinary melodramas. And I mean, melodramas that were rich with colour, characters who needed emotional help, physical help, and all, you know, they were just really very needy people. And Todd Haynes very recently remade one of his classic films, and the name of the new film is, well, actually I was going to say the old film, the title is All That Heaven Allows, and the new film stars Julianne Moore and Dennis Haysbert and the other Dennis, whose name I can't remember.
Not Dennis
right
Hopper.
No. It's just another Dennis.
And tell us, what's it particularly about this film that
well,
it sounds like both versions of the film are really worth the watch.
Okay. In the new version of the film, what we have is a woman who discovers that her husband is secretly, he has an emotional life that doesn't include hers, because he discovers that he's actually gay. And the other man in her life, who is her gardener, played by Dennis Haysbert, is a black man. The film is set in 1957, and in the remake, Todd Haynes beautifully contrasts. On the one hand, she's got a man who won't make love to her and is going through his own emotional turmoil. And on the other hand, she's got a black man who identifies that this woman is in need, but he can't physically go near her because of segregation and because of the kinds of restrictions, social restrictions that existed in the 1950s. And so what you find yourself emotionally drawn to this woman who is living an unsatisfied life, and you want her to be with Dennis Haysbert, who really can supply and can give her the confidence and the emotional security that she needs.
And you know, you've put your finger on something that's really, I think, powerful about film, isn't it? How, and when you talk about film and various films that you've talked about, isn't it extraordinary how film can, I guess because it's in a very condensed period of time, just give you such a broad palette of the emotions and different kind of quirks and ups and downs of life.
Well, the key thing to remember is that film is about emotion. Without emotion, you might as well point the camera at a building and just keep it running. You know, who cares? You must have people that speak to you, that can give you an insight into your own journey in life.
That's really wonderful. Tell us, is there a film, I just want, just before we close, tell us a film that's, is there a film that, a kind of a guilty pleasure? You know, it's interesting, when we were talking about music.
You mean like a rubbish film?
Yeah, a rubbish film, but that's somehow great, but that somehow that in a way perhaps shouldn't be great, but somehow is great.
Oh, there are hundreds of them.
Tell us.
Well, I actually don't enjoy, I actually cannot say that there is a kind of carry-on sort of film or something like that I would actually say that nobody else knows that I love this and I watch this only when I'm alone. No. That's not possible. My favourite American film of all time is Chinatown. My favourite film from other territories in the world is Rucas Negra, which was a breakthrough film for me because it's about a young black boy from the Caribbean who grows up and who finds his intellect and his heart and everything, and that was the very, very first film that actually enabled me to understand the true meaning of identification. That was the very first time that I was able to watch a film, and there was a young black boy there that reminded me of myself. That had never ever happened.
And that's wonderful. I think a lovely place to kind of round it up. How it's interesting. I guess very often when it comes to film and music, we watch, we enjoy, it's entertainment, but when you talk about how it can can somehow reflect back and inform us about it's just
very briefly, I told you that I don't love or study film or taught film. I didn't do that because I want to be entertained. That is not to me what film is about, whether the study of it or the enjoyment of it. When I watch a film, when I see a film, I hope to be moved. I want something in that story to tell me about myself, about the world.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you very much. And I'm hoping that some people who perhaps have some of those films that they may have not discovered might be very tempted to go and discover, might be moved to go and watch those films. Thank you very much, Dr. Martin Patrick. A real pleasure. I'm going to leave you to smile as I turn off the camera. Thank you very much.
Right.
Like in the old days.
Oh, my goodness. Hi. Bye.